Hello everyone. I had a viewer make a suggestion to me, and I'm always up for suggestions, some of which I think I can manage, others I know my personality and know that I can't organize my life around that idea, but some of them I can. So, sorry. I have, my pen collection is, as one pen collector said one time to me, he said, "You don't have a collection of pens, Pierre. You have 10 collections, and they're all mixed together." And that might be true. The person that said that is Otto Yang, Dr. Otto Yang, MD, who has his collection is among the best collections that I know, because he honed his desire and his focus on one little tiny point. And yet there's still lots of variety in the collection. And it's a collection that other people don't have. They may have pens that are similar or exact models that he collects, but the assortment of the pens is what makes the collection. It's like a bouquet of flowers. You know, you don't put every flower that you can buy at the flower shop together. You pick the ones that go together, and you pick the ones that are, primary blooms for your little vase, and then you pick the secondary ones that maybe they're bigger, but their colors are faded or whatever. I don't know how to do fucking flower arranging, and then there's the cast of thousands in the background, just the little tiny blooms and the greens and things like that just are used to make the 3 stars of your bouquet beautiful. So by assembling all of these things together, or all of these pens together, you come up with a collection that is meaningful. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of pens, and I have a bunch of pens. And it's hard for me to keep track of a bunch if they were a collection, or even 2 collections, or maybe 3 collections of pens, and I kept them separate. I might remember which ones I have, but I have so many. I know this is a first world problem, but one of the things, if I could, if with my genie coming out of a lamp and had a wish, what I would love to do is to look at me, I'm a chocolate mess, would be to assemble all of the pens to be perfect in my mind. I know, scary thought, Pierre Gustafson's perfect mind. So this is what, for a pen to be perfect in my mind, it needs to have a quality that makes the pen sing and hum and be perfect. So it has to have, in my mind again, a nib that suits the pen. That seems like it's pretty easy. This nib fits on this pen. It's the correct nib. What are you talking about? And that's not what I'm talking about. It has to suit the pen. This nib, I had a pen that was very similar to this. In fact, I can show it to you. It's right here somewhere. And I don't need 2 of them. Sometimes I need 10 of them, but I don't need 2 of these. Okay, where are you? See, this is what happens. I can't find, oh, there it is, I think. There, it's right here. Let's see if I change my mind. Now, many of you would look at these pens through your loop and you'd say, okay, I'm going to keep the one that's in perfect condition. And you'd look at the loop under, and there might be a little tiny tooth mark here or a piece of brassing there, and you decide which one is going to be the keeper. And I didn't really do that much because that's not important to me. The important part are the nibs. And I tried this nib. There's nothing wrong with this nib. This nib is really, really great. And I tried this nib. There's nothing wrong with this nib. It's also really, really great. It's a little bit broader and it feels a little bit rounder. And that, to me, fit the personality of this pen that has this rounded Schaefer clip. Sort of, it looks like, these clips look like they came out of a toothpaste tube or something. There's something very fluid about this design, and the rounded streamlined thing and the sort of cigar shapedness of all of it made sense that this pen, this nib, the one that's broader, seemed better for this than this. Now I might figure out a way to come up with a equally convincing argument why this nib belongs on this pen more than that nib, but it's not coming to me. So this is the one I'm keeping because this seems to belong together better. Here's another Schaefer, same color. This is a military clip. It has a little issue with its lever, which I've tried to fix a million times and have been unable to. But it's fixable. I just haven't figured it out yet. I mean, I haven't found the right pressure bar to put in there. Okay? Thank you. This nib is among the finest that I have, and it's very, very fine, slightly flexible. Is it a lifetime nib? It is a lifetime nib. So it is correct. It may have come in this pen. I have no idea. Because if I see a pen nib that belongs better in this pen than the nib it had, I will put that pen nib in here. And this pen has this flexible, very fine flexible nib, and it's a military pen. So in my mind, part of the thing that makes me remember that, first of all, it's on my desk where I see it almost every day, and I have a drawer of fine nibbed pens. Or extra fine nib, and this is in that drawer, and I see it there, and it's labeled extra fine, so I know that. But also helping me remember it is pardon me, I've created a little story of this military pen. This is called a military clip because it allowed you to button your tunic pocket button down over without the pen sticking out. There'd be more pen sticking up, so you couldn't do that. So here you can do that. Anyway, blah blah blah. So in my mind I thought, okay, so this is a military guy that was captured by the enemy, and he only had one piece of paper given to him by the Red Cross, and no matter how much he tries to bribe Sergeant Schultz, he doesn't have more than that one piece of paper. So he's writing his memoirs, with this tiny, 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 tiny little point. Or he's not captured yet, and he's using this tiny point to draw on. He just draws on microfilm. He doesn't use a camera. He just has microfilm that he draws the rocket installation details with. So in my mind, I've developed this little fantasy about the guy that owned this pen. I normally don't do that, but sometimes I do. So this pen nib now belongs in this pen because there's a story in my head. It has nothing to do with reality, but it's in my head and it works. I know when I look at this pen with this roundedness, I realize, this pen here has the same roundedness as this one, and this one might have a completely different nib. But then I have to remember that I'm not entirely consistent in my little fantasies. This pen, now I know, I can tell, I can hear you pen people out there that collect pens say, God, that's so beautiful, that green is just perfect, look like it came out of the factory that way. Well, it does. So there. But for some reason, it has, or it had when I bought it, I can't remember. It has this nice stub nib. And it doesn't belong in this pen. It's even slightly flexible. This pen is a Schaefer, and I always think of Schaefers as being almost always hard and stiff, and this one especially is sort of weird. It has a more modern clip than belongs on a flat-topped pen. It's a weird throwback. I don't think they were making flat-top pens at the time that they were making these clips, but they probably had many, many boxes full of green stonite material, or whatever they called this. Stonite, I guess that was gold bond. Stonite. So, this nib, what kind of nib should this have? Write your answers below. It's a slender, not senior size, but it's a junior sized, long, lanky. It's like a teenager that has his growth spurt in the clothes that he wore in September for school. None of them fit. And he's suddenly the tallest person in the class, and he's awkward and embarrassed, and his voice keeps cracking, and who knows what else is happening to his body. But this nib is too grown up for this. This should have in my mind, a finer nib. But it has this one in it, and I've gotten used to it. So I know that this pen, this bright green pen in that drawer full of stub nibs, has that nib in it. Here's an example of a pen that I got recently that had an entirely wrong nib in it. It was the nib was correct with the pen. It had an Eversharp, a very rare, small-sized Eversharp nib, but it was not, it was big, bald, iridium, just a nasty Johnny One Note kind of a stiff nib with a big old ball of iridium on the end of it. And this pen is so elegant and so thin and so light that it just was wrong. It was wrong that it had that nib. And I only have a few of these pens, and none of them had the nib that I wanted for it. So this nib is a Schaefer number 3 nib. I'm hearing people gasp in the audience, and I don't know who they're calling to have me arrested and thrown in jail. They're calling the grammar police. That's the closest thing that they can come up with. No, this is, if I looked really, really hard, I might be able to find a small Skyline nib. See, this is a Skyline. This is almost right for this pen, but I don't think it fits. I think I tried that size, and this size pen is quite different. But let's pretend that this said Eversharp on the nib, not Schaefer. And let's say that this pen was engraved with a name. There isn't a cartouche, so if it had a cartouche and it was unnamed, what sort of name should be on it? What person would have owned this pen? I think someone like, the first name would be Phineas or something sort of. If Wally Cox had a name that matched better his personality, his meekness. Wally is just too loud a name. Wally is, a big overweight bowler that is a plumber by day and a bowler by night, and his name is Wally. Whereas Wally Cox and the characters he portrayed in his life, he actually was, I learned this on Wikipedia, he was Marlon Brando's best friend. Marlon Brando ended up with Wally Cox's ashes that he talked to every night. Or maybe not every night, but they were roommates for a while. And I don't think your mind has to go to the gutter. I think they were platonic. Brando said he would marry, if Wally was a dame, he would have married him because they were soulmates. Wally Cox and Marlon Brando. The odd couple, if there was such a thing. But Wally's persona, this meek, mild weakling, he looks like a 98-pound weakling, would have this pen. But Wally Cox on the side isn't the right name for it. It has to be a Mr. Peepers. It has to be his one of his characters' names. So, and this is too elegant from Mr. Peepers' science teacher in high school in 1950. This is too elegant a thing. This has to be owned by some Boston Brahmini eldest child of someone that maybe he had tuberculosis as a kid or something and spoke very quietly and was a book learner and collected butterflies or something. But this is a perfect ensemble. An off-brand pen that the cap doesn't screw on. A good service pen company, the pen company that I own, And what pen nib did I put in this? It's weird because the section held a very small nib, so already the pen is sort of awkward. And yeah, I suppose I could find a different section to hold a bigger nib, but I kind of like when the pen already in its how it's built is put together sort of strangely. So it's this big, fat, sort of I don't think anyone would call this beautiful. It's sort of clumsy. These big rounded ends. It's sort of, but it has this really nice reddish pattern. Can you see the pattern it has? And I use red ink in it, and I have a big, broad nib. This is kind of a stub nib, but it's more broad than it is stub, and it's very flexible. So somehow that fits the sort of lumpiness and blobbiness of this particular pen. And who made the nib? This is a Swan nib. Okay, so call the grammar police. Maybe I have a Swan pen that this nib would be perfect in, but somehow the Swan nib made it into this pen, and it's staying there for the moment. It doesn't really want to catch, so this doesn't ever go in my pocket because it would slip down. Another Schaefer. These are two Schaefers, okay? One is streamline, one is flat top. Both of them have similar nibs in them, but only one of them is correct. This one has a flexible Schaefer nib. It doesn't have the right feed in it, but anyway, somehow it got in there. William H. Lubin is written there in beautiful cursive lettering. And even though William Lubin chose a big flat top pen, I always think of Schaefer pens as having stiff nibs, and William Lubin picked a pen that sort of seems to need a stub nib just based on its conservativeness. I think of Schaefers as being conservative. Watermans are Democrats. Schaefers are Republicans, or worse, fascists. But look at that nib. This is not the normal Schaefer nib, but it belongs in this pen because it writes like his name. Two B's, so maybe Lubin. Lubin, not Lubin. E-N. So this is really, really neat for this pen. This pen look at its name, Lee Snyder. Big, all caps, really unattractive. I mean, in the sense of there's no beauty in how it's written. And this has a very, very flexible nib in it as well, but I don't think it really belongs here. This nib, which is really, really nice, belongs in a pen that doesn't say Lee Snyder in all caps. What nib belongs in this pen? Now I might put, and also, here's a clue. Lee Snyder was a left-handed person. How do I know that? because you see his name when he's holding it. His name you see this way, and he's holding it in his left hand so you can see his name. He doesn't need to remember his name. He just sees, oh, I'm Lee Snyder. So he writes his signature, signs his checks. And Lee Snyder would, I don't want to say it would be wasted on him, this nib, because there's some lefties that do write beautifully with copper plate flexible nibs. But I think that the correct nib for Lee Snyder, lefty Lee Snyder, would be a nib that's Johnny one note. Fine, but not flexible. Firm and fine, just like Lee. Lee Snyder. So the thought that my viewer thought would help me remember which nib is in which pen is by writing down the words that describe the pen, and maybe that little factoid of words, attributes of the pen nib, would help me remember rather than just my random scribblings. And that might work. But one of the things that I like to do is to, if I can, match the nib with the shape and the style of the pen. And if I can come up with a little fantasy about Lee Snyder or this unnamed private or whatever, that might help. Another thing that helps me is color coding the inks that I use. I do a lot of calligraphy work, and I often have to use green ink. So the pens that are green I use for green ink, so I don't have to completely wash them out. Every time I use them. Even if I'm using a slightly different color green than what might have been in it before, I'm not mixing it with red ink. So I'm lazy. I'm a lazy bum. So I'm looking for an Eversharp nib. I want this to say Eversharp. I described this once as, it is an Eversharp nib, they just mistyped it. It was a typo in the factory, and it came out Sheaffer. That happens. Who's to say? I'm going to just see if I can find... Come on, here. Yes, I found it. I have another one of these and a pencil. These were called Envoys. Another pen person found that for me. He did the legwork. This is pretty damn close, this nib. This is an Eversharp nib. Yeah, this is pretty darn close. So Mortimer, or whatever I thought your name was going to be. This is almost perfect. This one is a little bit prickly, this Sheaffer nib, which I really like. I like the really, really fine line but the one that the Eversharp nib that's in this one is pretty close. It talks a little too loud. This one whispers, and I like the whispering. Okay, Pierre. I thought I had a third one. Shit. I do have a third one somewhere. It's missing the pin that holds the lever in is there. See? I got 3 of them. I can play 3-card Monte, 3-card Envoy. Okay, this is the one that was with the set. It goes here. This is the one that needs a pin. Oh, maybe it doesn't. I'm misremembering everything. Do I have another one of these things? Do I have a 4th one? That can't be. I can't have 4 of these. This one's very loose here. And this one has a nib that's very... This is the nib that I think came in one of them. Well, still with one of them, but it's the one that I really didn't like. Okay, let's go. See if I have a 4th. Because I could. Why are we going over here? Why isn't it somewhere else? That's a good question. Well, I thought it would be here. I thought that's where I saw it. Who knows? It's hard being me. Well, evidently, I'm thinking of another gold-filled pen. Well, I didn't think I had 4, so these are the selection. And one of them is for sale, the one that has the nib that I don't like, but maybe you like it. What do you think? Bye.